This is your Tuesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. My goodness, we have a lot to get to today. Marcus Fuller will join me here in just a little while, covers Gophers basketball for the Tribune. A lot of interesting stuff with Marcus, including a look at all of the players who left the Gophers from last season to this year and how they might have helped this year and what they are up to at their other schools. I thought that was interesting. Marcus wrote about that the other day, and he and I talked about that in greater detail. Who would have helped? How things might have been different this season if even a few of those key players had stayed. Got to get to the Timberwolves. They keep winning. They blew out Portland, undermanned Portland team, a perhaps tanking Portland team on Monday. 124-81, I believe, was the final score. That is not. That's not pretty. Not a good look for the Blazers, but certainly a good one for the Timberwolves. Got to get to Major League Baseball. Sounds like if things don't go better in negotiations today, another week of games will be lost. That includes the Twins' home opener in their first week of home games, and an Aaron Rodgers update, because what show would be complete without an Aaron Rodgers update? But first, what did I miss? The big story, or should I say stories of Monday, both had to do with sports gambling. Sports wagering here in Minnesota sounds like it's getting much closer to being legalized. I wrote about this a few months ago in great detail, just kind of what the hurdles were, what the prospects were, and at that time, did not seem like there was support for the expansion of gambling, the expansion of sports wagering from the Minnesota Indian Gaming Association. They were essentially a no comment at the time. Bills introduced Monday, though, they would be not just for betting in casinos and travel casinos, but also online, which is interesting to me. I didn't think that would be a part of this. I mean, I think that a lot of people were pushing for that to be a part of this, but the bills do include that, and it sounds like the Indian Gaming Commission said Monday. I'm reading from the Star Tribune story that the tribal nations do support the legislation that includes online gaming. And that's a big deal because that is where the big money is at. So we will see where that goes from here. But it sounds like, from what I reported a few months ago, a lot of the other key stakeholders were interested in this. The teams are certainly interested in this because, they want, especially the online component, people are placing a small wager on games. Say they make a small bet on a Timberwolves game, a small bet on a Twins game. They are more likely to watch that game. They are more likely to stick with that game. They might even make some in-game wagers, different score lines, different things that might happen over a quarter of a game or a period of a hockey game. Someone might score a goal, things like that. All sorts of kind of smaller prop bets that you can make on games these days that people would be interested in. That helps TV ratings. That helps create a more dedicated fan base. So the teams are interested in it. The TV folks are definitely interested in it. And now it sounds like legislators are getting more interested in it and have some bipartisan support. And, frankly, it's been happening other places. It's happening, in offshore markets. It's happening in Wisconsin. It's happening in Iowa. The product here does sound like it might be a little bit robust, so that part of it is interesting to me, that if there's this online component to it, that could be a game changer. So we will see where it goes from here, but it's feeling like the momentum to pass this sometime this year, which I don't know how soon that would take effect. Might not be until 2023, I would imagine, until we actually see the games begin, so to speak. But some interesting movement in this along those lines. Related to that, Calvin Ridley, Falcons wide receiver, suspended for the entire 2022 season for betting on NFL games, including Falcons games. And if you can't make the connection between these two things, you're not really good at connecting the dots. This is just part of the proliferation of gambling, sports gambling in this country. And I think the thing that I would say is the most interesting thing about the Calvin Ridley situation is I don't think a lot of people think it's a big deal that he bet on the Falcons to win these games. He bet on his own team to win these games. I think a generation ago, when Pete Rose was doing it in baseball, and got banned from the game for his whole lifetime. I think people thought it was a huge deal. Right now, I think attitudes have changed for a lot of people, so much so that they don't think that this Calvin Ridley punishment, or that he, wagering $1,500 on games, including Falcons games, is a punishment that fits the crime. So huge story with that, though, just that he's getting suspended for that amount of time. It's a full season. He took to social media to one of his tweets was like, "LOL, I only bet $1,500. I don't have a gambling problem," stuff like that. So it's just his attitude about it is interesting as well. I know I was wrong, but I'm getting 1 year. LOL was one of his tweets. So the overall thing I would say about this is just it feels like this is all part of the shifting attitude on sports betting. I don't know if this is good. I don't know if this is bad. I just know it's a thing. It feels like it's happened slowly and then fast over the last 3 years or so since it became possible for different states to legalize sports gambling, to legalize making bets on games. That piece of it feels very different to me than how I grew up when I was growing up. And I sound like an old man. I'm 45, which is, take your pick if that's old. But it feels like the attitudes have certainly changed on this. And this is the world we're entering right now, and it's coming to Minnesota, it sure sounds like.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Glad to be joined right now by Marcus Fuller, Gophers men's basketball beat writer, covers college basketball in general for the Star Tribune. Marcus, how are you?
Oh, I'm not bad. I'm not bad at all. Did I think I'd be covering the last place team in the Big Ten at the end of the season? No, but I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking.
Marcus, I thought you would be. Even after they started really well, I think the talent deficit showed up. And that gets to the heart of what I wanted to talk to you about today, primarily because I thought you wrote something really interesting. I think it was just that went online Monday about just all the players that were on last year's team and where they went, how they're doing this year. And I actually had thought about looking that up a couple of weeks ago, and I got as far as Gabe Kalsher, and then I stopped. And I'm glad you went the whole gamut, because it does show kind of what they were missing. And I think I tweeted this like a week ago or something, with like, if this team with how good Peyton Willis and Jamison Battle were, if they just had one or two other guys, I feel like they could have been a factor this season. And maybe not even a tournament team, but maybe closer to the bubble, at least not 4-16 as they wound up in the Big Ten. But you wrote about all the guys that left, that transferred out for whatever reason or another. And I wanted to ask you about that, because it when you look at all the names and where they went, it is quite stark, isn't it?
Yeah, if you look, thanks for reading that. Yeah, I think if you look at just the starting five alone this year, you can see where the deficiencies are. I enjoyed watching this team at the beginning of the year. They surprised people. They definitely can shoot the ball. They surprised me actually how well they played defense early without a formidable inside presence. But I think as the Big Ten went along, you could see that the lack of size and the depth in the front court was the biggest issue. So when you see, those guys missing, Brandon Johnson would have helped them in the paint. Liam Robbins would have helped them tremendously. And a lot of people say, hey, he wasn't healthy, but you know what? He finished the season. He did play the last 9 games for Vanderbilt. And one of those games, they gave Auburn, quite a bit of a game there, and it's number 1 team in the country at the time. He's playing pretty well right now, and pretty close to what he was playing at the end of the year before he got hurt at Minnesota. So if you're talking about an all league, especially defensive big man, you talk about another hot shooting forward. You're not going to replace Jamison Battle. He's your best player, but you add some depth there. And also a kid at Pacific, Sam Freeman, who's 6'10", 250 pounds. He had 12 points and 5 rebounds versus Gonzaga, 3 blocks. Okay, that's the front line of Chet Holmgren and Drew Timme, the best in the country. So, could he come in and give you, 4 points, 5 rebounds, a block or 2 off the bench? Sure. So that alone, just the front court depth alone, is what they were definitely missing. Eric Curry did the best he could, and then he got hurt at the end of the year, suffered some illnesses, and just couldn't give him what he normally could health-wise. If you look at the way this team played at the end of the year last year, Marcus Carr was carrying this team just like Jamison Battle is this year. Apologize if you hear my dogs barking in the background. But if you look at the way that Jamison Battle has had to score the ball, it's too much. I think it was too much on his shoulders. And Peyton Willis, yes, he takes some of that pressure off of Jamison. But come on now, think about the trio of Marcus Carr, Jamison Battle, Peyton Willis. Now Carr and Willis did play together 2 years ago. And, that wasn't the best experience for Peyton because he didn't have the ball in his hands like he does this year. So I think there was probably a mix between the two. I think if you look at Marcus Carr this year, he's less of a big time scorer and he's more of a facilitator. He's actually improved defensively. So I think if he were able to change his game a little bit to mesh with Peyton Willis, that's a dynamic backcourt that they had and that could be this year if they would have kept Marcus Carr. And Gabe Kalsher is in that mix as well.
And to Jamal Mashburn, who followed Richard Pitino to New Mexico, he averaged like 19 points a game, albeit, in a conference not as good as the Big Ten and for a team that didn't play particularly well either. And you kind of interesting, kind of looking at how these teams fared. Looks like Kalsher will be in the NCAA tournament with Iowa State. Hasn't shot the ball really well this year. That 1 year he had, was it his freshman year where he shot like 40% from three? That has maybe become the outlier in his career, but still very much a good defensive player, a solid starter, could have certainly helped. Out of all of these guys, who do you think would have helped this team the most? I mean, if healthy, is it a Liam Robbins? I mean, they just were so perilously thin in the front court this year.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying. If you add a 7-footer that led the Big Ten in blocks last year, that at times really gave them everything that they needed as far as a scoring presence. I mean, people forget that Liam Robbins, had 27 points, I want to say, 14 or 15 rebounds and 5 blocks against Ohio State. I looked those numbers up. He also hit a 3 in that game. I don't think that, there hadn't been a player to do that in like 20 years, in the Big Ten. So, he was the reason why they were able to beat Ohio State, Michigan State, Iowa at home. He gave them an inside presence to go along with Marcus Carr on the perimeter. We know that this was a perimeter heavy team this year. So they got the pieces they needed on the perimeter. Not saying that, let's take Marcus Carr, let's take Gabe Kalsher, let's take Jamal Mashburn if we could get him. But I like the guys that they brought in on the perimeter, but they didn't add anything in the post. They didn't. Jamison Battle is an unbelievable player. He's the best player on this team. He will be the best player on next year's team. He added some post presence to his game a little bit as far as being able to defend a little bit in the post. But he's not a post player. He's a perimeter player. So that's why I don't put him in that mix. Yeah. I'm adding him to the perimeter talent that they brought in. They didn't bring any post talent. And so Liam Robbins would have done wonders for this team. Obviously, you don't want to, if you had an all Big Ten point guard coming back, I'm taking it, and then you just say, Marcus, I'm not Richard Pitino, the style that I'm going to play is a little different. We're going to move the ball around, share it. We're going to make you better, prepare you for the NBA, be a facilitator as much as you are a scorer. And that's what Chris Beard's doing at Texas right now with Marcus Carr. So I would say the obvious question, or the obvious answer would be Marcus Carr and Liam Robbins. But again, I mean, Mike, you look at Brandon Johnson, and you look at some of the guys, these other guys, like a Jamal Mashburn, and you're saying, man, I didn't really expect that. Brandon Johnson, he did well this year, but he's at DePaul. He's at another high major school, and he's leading them in rebounds. He's a double-figure scorer there. And Jamal's putting the kind of numbers at New Mexico. You say, hey, he might have done something here too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just, it's kind of a what if of like, what if they could have put together a different kind of roster this year. But, this is the kind of thing that happens when when you switch coaches, when things, don't go the way you want them to the year before. And, people might forget, in Pitino's last season, things were trending up at a certain point. If they hadn't been besieged by, some pretty key injuries in the last, 4 to 6 weeks of the season, that could have been a tournament team. That could have been, Richard Pitino still here in this job, but ultimately Ben Johnson gets hired. I guess the thinking forward now, I mean, the regular season's over, 4-16 in the Big Ten, still got the Big Ten tournament to go, but, no illusions about a deep run there, probably just based on what we've seen this year. Like what has to happen? How can they remake themselves, into at least a team that could be more competitive next season? I mean, and maybe work the portal with a little bit more time to their advantage.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it's pretty clear that they have a cornerstone, which is great. I mean, in the first year, how many coaches can say that I have an all Big Ten player coming back, maybe one of the best players in the league? And they have that with Jamison Battle. So coming into this year, we knew Battle was a good player, good piece, right? We didn't know he was a cornerstone, like I could build my program around him piece.
Right.
And he's done that. So that's something that, making him better, taking the next step in his game, leadership-wise, defensively, those things that I wrote about last week to help him take the next step forward that I've heard around the league. And I think that's a huge step for them. So making him the best player he can be, maybe even an NBA prospect. Then I think, one of the things that they were lucky to get this year is Peyton Willis. I mean, he's if they were a middle of the pack type of team, he would be borderline all conference point guard.
Right.
And, you can go in the portal and there are not going to be a lot of all conference point guards saying, hey, I want to come to Minnesota, unfortunately. Even ones that from Minnesota, which I don't know of any right now. Some Mike, then text Ben Johnson.
Right.
So I think that they'll look for the best point guard they can get that's similar to Peyton, and that he's a playmaker. He can really score the ball, but really is defense and facilitating first. And they need that post presence that can take away pressure from Jamison Battle, who is not a true post player. You don't want Battle in there having to play the 5 like he's done a lot of games toward the end of the season here because Eric wasn't healthy. And you don't want him to have to get 10 rebounds a game. You want a guy to really is going to handle a lot of that dirty work in the paint defensively and rebounding and really score for you a little bit too. I think Pharrell Payne is going to be that in the future. How much they can rely on him as a freshman, I don't know yet. I know Daniel too came in, and Daniel's in the NBA now. As a freshman, they started him early and he did fine in non-conference, but once the Big Ten started, he really had a tough time adjusting physically. And that's going to happen to any freshman, and even as talented as Daniel was. So if they're going to hit the portal as hard as they can to find a post presence that can step in and handle a lot of that next year to take the pressure off of Jamison and Pharrell Payne. And again, the point guard spot, I think that's really important as well.
And they should have, hopefully a healthy Parker Fox. I saw he was recently cleared to resume work, and he, hurt his knee, not too long, was spring, summer last year. So, prognosis good, definitely for, being ready to go for next season. What do you imagine he's kind of a little bit of an unknown. I know he was one of the more sought after players, to a certain degree in the portal, especially coming from Division II, like he was. How does he fit into the overall mix? I know he's taller, but is he forward? What position would he play, and how would he fit into this team?
No, we talked to Ben a little about this last week that, is he going to play at the end of the year? He's healthy. He was in the layup line versus Wisconsin. I'm sorry, versus Indiana, and he was doing 360s and windmills. And I'm like, well, because usually, you come off a knee injury, you want to take it easy. The guy's going to need a whole year before he gets his legs back. He didn't take very long for Parker Fox to get his legs back. Although what he was doing before that, the knee injury, was probably even more impressive than he's doing now. Instead of just doing 360, he was taking off from the free throw line. But I think, we've seen a lot of great athletes that they've had over the years. Rodney Williams, Jarvis Omersa. I think that he's that type of athlete, but I think he's more skilled in that he can step out and shoot, put the ball on the floor, Division two is entirely obviously different talent level than the Big Ten. But he's a guy that I think can play the 3 and the 4, just like Jamison can. And then those guys can interchange, like this game, perimeter, Jamison will be there, Parker will play. So I think those two guys at the forward position, as well as Isaiah Enan, you're going to have your 3-4. That's going to be rock solid. You don't have to worry about that. But, all of those guys are just not true inside force type of guys in the Big Ten. They're not going to get you 10 rebounds too many times in a game. They're not going to, have a bunch of blocks. Although Parker did block a lot of shots at the Division two level, it's going to be a little harder when the guys are 6'10", 6'11", 7 feet, And so I just think that Parker will be a possible starter. It depends on, how he comes back next year and fits in with whoever they add in the transfer portal. But I would see him, and him and Jamison are a good, 3-4 option. They need a point guard, they need a center. And I'm excited to see what they can do in the portal.
Maybe last thing for you, Marcus, enjoying this conversation. Thanks for joining the show today. Gopher season probably will be over here in not too long, but what are you looking forward to the rest of March? I mean, we got a whole tournament season. We got the women's Final Four coming to Minneapolis in a few weeks. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to look forward to. What's on your radar in terms of stuff to cover or teams you're watching?
Well, as you know, we did an incredible job with the men's Final Four as a staff, the Star Tribune. I'm so appreciative of being a part of this group, so talented. And, we're going to put together hopefully a really good package for the women's Final Four. I can't wait. We've already had meetings and I'm excited to see what's coming next. They're going to be a lot of changes on the women's side to match up with the men, and deservedly so. And I'm glad that it can be here in Minneapolis for the first time. Are we going to get Paige Beckers here for a championship game? That would be like the dream of all dream. And we've had that before. We had that dream, and it didn't happen with Trey Jones and Zion Williamson. So you got to temper your expectations a little bit. She's coming off an injury. She's playing again. So that's the outstanding part, is that she has a chance, right? She'll be in the tournament. She'll be playing for UConn. And when Paige Beckers is playing for UConn, I think they have a shot. Wherever they're seated, I think that's the biggest thing we're looking at, is like, where are they going to see UConn? Are they going to disrespect them for not having Paige and losing some games? Or are they going to, put them where they should be at a higher seed because they have the best player arguably in the country after maybe Caitlin Clark and, a couple others. So UConn definitely with Paige Beckers, where all eyes are on her. And then, the men's Final Four, Chet Holmgren has a chance to play for a national championship. If Gonzaga keeps going forward like they did last year with Jalen. And, this is a really good year parity, man. I think that there's going to be a couple teams here we're looking and, coming up to the Final Four saying, hey, I didn't think this team was going to be in the mix. Who is that? I don't know. But we've seen so many upsets this year. There's been a number of teams that have jumbled around at number one early in the year. Purdue, Baylor. And, so Illinois want to share the Big Ten. So did Wisconsin. So I think this is really a year where it's tossed up in the men's side. And then, like I said, the women got a lot of talented teams, but we're all hoping Paige ends up here in Minneapolis and in the Final Four.
That would be very cool indeed. That would be something for everybody to look forward to. So hopefully that does happen. Marcus, great stuff. As always, follow Marcus's work, Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. And we'll check it with you again maybe as we get closer to the tournaments. All right?
All right. Thanks a lot for having me.
Good catching up with Marcus as usual. I thought it was interesting to hear him talk a little bit more about Jamison Battle as a cornerstone player. I think he is, but I also think it'll be interesting to see as the Gophers add more talent around him. Does he flourish more? Does he have to settle into a slightly different role? How does he become kind of a pivot person for a team that can be much better? And that's going to be the key to next season for Ben Johnson. How much can you build around Jamison Battle? What kind of pieces do you need to add? What kind of team can this be next season if you think you've found kind of that player to build around? Let's move on to the Timberwolves for a little while. Beat Portland, like I said, by 43 points. A lot of different people saw action in that game. It was no D'Angelo Russell, no Anthony Edwards, didn't matter. Wolves still had plenty of firepower to beat a Portland team that's just been completely depleted, rested some guys that are pretty good. They might not have a lot of incentive to win right now. Hard to say. Maybe trying to lose, I don't know. Maybe that's too strong a word, but we're getting to that part of the NBA season where teams are disincentivized to win. Other teams are trying to win. The Wolves, everybody above them keeps winning. Interesting about that, by the way. I talked maybe a couple weeks ago about how Wolves need to get up into that number 6 seed to make sure they can try to play Memphis, which was kind of looking like they were going to be that 3 seed at that point. Memphis has jumped into the number 2 spot, and still the Wolves want to get into that top 6, avoid the play-in. If you get into the play-in, you can always get bounced without even getting to the actual playoffs, even if you're the 7 or 8 and get 2 cracks at it. But if they did wind up in that 7 spot and manage to get through to be the number 7 seed, it could end up being Memphis as that 2 seed because they have moved past Golden State by half a game. Golden State missing a lot of guys lately, losing a lot of games lately. And so that piece of it is interesting to me too. Is Golden State vulnerable, especially if they don't have a full complement of players? I still think you'd rather play Memphis, but either one of those teams, I suppose, might be an opportunity for the Wolves in the first round of the playoffs. Again, if they can get there, which is still a big if. Can't believe we're talking about Wolves and playoffs after all these years of, them being just truly awful, just being on the other end of games like the one you watched perhaps on Monday. A couple more things before we get out of here. Aaron Rodgers, he's got to make a decision soon. You guys, a franchise tag deadline is today, so that affects Devontae Adams. The new league year starts next week, starts in 8 days. The legal tampering period, if you want to call it, for that is less than a week away. Starts next Monday for free agency. A lot of reporting, interesting. ESPN reporting on Monday saying that the Packers had made him an offer that would alter the quarterback market, which is obviously something that's coming, leaking out from the Packers, and then Pro Football Talk reporting that Rodgers is mulling different teams he might go to. That it looks like it's the Broncos, the Steelers, the Titans. That all 3 of those teams have kind of put together their best offer, and now Aaron Rodgers is thinking about where he might want to play. No surprise, those are all AFC teams. I don't think Green Bay ultimately would trade him within the conference and have that come back to bite them in the playoffs. Maybe the Super Bowl, but not the playoffs. Although we will see how well Green Bay fares if indeed they do trade Aaron Rodgers. But bottom line is, decision's got to be coming soon. He said, over 3.5 weeks ago or so that he would make a decision in a couple weeks. Still hasn't come. Longer it goes, the more you wonder if a trade is the thing that's going to happen, because the thing that could happen more quickly is him just saying, nope, I want to be here. So hopefully we'll have a resolution to this all very soon. Let's finish with the cooler. Speaking of a resolution to all of this very soon, Major League Baseball sounds like it would cancel another week of games if they do not come to a labor agreement by today. That would be significant for the Twins because that would wipe out a week of home games. They're slated to open the home portion of their schedule on April 7th. That would no longer happen if these games are wiped out. So series against Seattle, series against the LA Dodgers would both be wiped out, and that is not good news. So I'm not optimistic that something's going to happen today. I think they're going to lose those those first 6 home games at Target Field, and that would be a shame for sure. That will do it for today. Like I said, we had a lot to get to, so many things going on. Chris Hine should be on Wednesday's show to talk more Timberwolves. Red hot out of the break. They get Oklahoma City on Wednesday night. So Chris and I will break down all things Wolves on Wednesday's show. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. We'll see you again tomorrow.